Hi, AP Lit. I wanted to make a quick video in which I give you a relatively brief overview of the prose question that will be the AP Lit essay for this year. The prose question is sometimes called question 2 because it's typically the second of the 3 essays that you normally write, but as you know, you're only writing 1 essay this year. And the one that you're writing is prose, and it's the one that we've not practiced. So I've talked about it a little bit with you, and if you've watched some of the AP review videos, you know a little bit about it. We have done a lot of work with essay writing, so all of that will come into play. We have done a lot of work with close reading and with annotating, so your critical reading ability will also come into play. But this is a specific kind of thing that we haven't practiced, so I just want to explain to you what they're asking you to do in a nutshell. So let's move this a little bit. All right, AP Lit. Prose. I want to be able to see it. All right, good. So the prose question is almost always going to be asking you about character. So you might have one, you might have multiple characters. And when there's a character in this prompt, they're typically going to ask you about that character's attitude towards something. And because I am a good reader and you are too, we know that characters' attitudes are generally complex. And when you can identify complexity, that gives you more to write about, because instead of a character just feeling one way, they might be feeling 2 different ways that are conflicting. And so you can create that kind of but still, even though this, also that. And so you can kind of prove multiple things and show how they're working in connection, in conjunction, making for something complex. So when you're looking at character attitude, you might be considering a character's attitude toward other people. So maybe their relationships, right? Maybe you have friends or siblings or people who just met. But regardless, we need to figure out how they feel about each other. Sometimes the prompt will ask about a character's relationship with their surroundings. That would be the setting of the piece. They might also ask you about their relationship with the situation that they're in. How is this character feeling about this specific issue, change of life, whatever they're dealing with? So when we look at character, there are some things that we're considering. Now, something else about character, obviously, is the idea of characterization. So we've talked a lot over the years, over your years of English classes, about characterization. So I made just kind of a short list here of some things that one could consider when they're looking at how an author characterizes a character, right? In a nutshell, that just means, how do we know what we know about this character? And so really a big one is the dialogue. So what is the character saying? But we also can consider things like, what's the setting that they're in? What's the tone? That's often created through diction. You've also got selection of detail, and this is something we didn't talk a lot about this year, but the specific details that are included in a piece or not included in a piece can be really significant, right? Why did the author choose to include or exclude what he did? Consider the structure. That's like plot structure. So how is the piece set up and organized? You've got point of view. So that's who's narrating it and why does that matter? You don't want to just explain that this is first or third person narration. You want to explain what that shows us or what that adds to the piece. What does the narrator know? What does the narrator not know? And why does that matter? Then there's figurative language and also contrasts. Contrasts goes back to the idea of a foil. So if you've got 2 characters, they might be really different in certain ways. And if they are, that's probably important because, as you know, when 2 characters kind of foil each other, it emphasizes those traits in which they're different. So that's something to think about as well. And I know that there was a review video on the as part of the YouTube review that the College Board is creating. Okay, so some other notes that I made related to the prose essay and really all essays in general. So the prompt, these are my notes in orange down here. Consider the prompt and what it's asking. We spent a lot of time talking about breaking down the prompt, figure out what they're asking, and make sure you answer the whole question. If you don't answer everything they're asking for, it's going to be almost impossible for you to score high on this essay. So know what the prompt is asking and answer that specifically. If they ask for one thing, give them one thing. If they ask for one scenario, give them one scenario. Don't do more than what they're asking. Also important here is your thesis. Now you want your thesis to be what's called defensible. That means, do you say something in your thesis that it's even possible to make a credible argument about? And if you do, then you're probably going to get the thesis point. If you think back to that rubric we've been using, there's a point for the thesis or there's 0 points for the thesis. So it's either defensible or it's not. That basically means you don't want your thesis to just be summarizing the piece. Okay, next we've got evidence. So once I have a thesis, then I need to kind of make some claims and explain my thesis and prove my thesis. So basically prove that your thesis is right with evidence from the text. Then we've also got analysis here. So you're going to give your thesis and then you're going to make some claims and you're going to provide evidence. But the analysis is really where you explain, hey, this is why my evidence proves my claims or my thesis. So I wrote this funny acronym over here, and I think I've talked about it with some of you, PEE. P on your essay. And what that means is in your paragraphs, make a point, provide evidence, and then explain your evidence. Point, evidence, explanation. This explanation is the analysis or the commentary that we're looking for. Without this, then your evidence is just a summary of the text. And no reader wants to read a summary of the text. They want to see that you can analyze through your commentary. One of the last things I wrote down here is line of reasoning. So make sure that all the claims that you're making in your essay are related. If you had a good thesis, they probably will be, but you want to keep referencing how do the claims that you're making in your paragraphs prove your thesis to be true? How do they support that? So keep going back to that. The last note that I put on my on my whiteboard today to share with you is to go chronological. I've heard a lot of readers talking recently about how it's really the best way to set up an essay. It allows you to focus on what we know at the beginning of the piece, what's presented throughout the text, so you can focus on structure, and then how does the piece end, and is that a nice sort of topic for you to maybe mention in your conclusion? Like, how does the piece end? And can you kind of leave us with a final thought about why it ends there and what that does kind of as a reflection on the whole text, on that whole page of text that I'm looking at? So that, in a nutshell, is the prose essay. Your only assignments for the week are to watch the videos that pertain to the test that you're taking. So for some of you, that's lit, for some it's Lang, and for some that's both. I think there's maybe only one of you that isn't testing at all, although some of you may have changed your mind. So whatever you're testing for, please watch at least some of the review videos. Thursday at 11, we will go sort of in a live chat room again, like we've been doing with your book discussions. But instead of discussing the book, we're going to talk about the prose essay. So you'll have a chance to ask any questions that you might have at that time. As always, reach out to me if you have questions, but your only assignment is to watch those really rich review videos on YouTube. Check the links. If you don't have them, they're in that document that I shared with you in Google Classroom. All the lit video links are there and the Lang video links are down below. Okay, see ya.